Our present story, I'm Sorry, by Tunnel of Dark Narrations, arises from the furthest reaches of imagination and from the history of our race. Beware. It contains adult themes and a fairly troubling state of affairs. They were unavoidable, for they are the facts of the case. Without them, there'd be no story. So consider yourself warned. And for us, right here, right after the sound of the crystal bowl, there is only the story. Now on with the show. Lately, I have marveled over how certain bugs show up where and when they do. And the thing is, I can't figure it out exactly. For example, how do cucumber beetles find cucumber plants? The only place I've ever seen them is on cucumber plants. Where are they the rest of the time? I might have the only cucumber plant in the county that I grew from a seed, and suddenly there'll be cucumber beetles on it and nowhere else. It's a mystery to me. Does the cucumber plant need the cucumber beetle? I imagine that the cucumber beetle needs the cucumber plant. Does it also work the other way around? What I'm saying right now is, does the plant create the bug? For that matter, does the cucumber genus or family or order, whatever it is, need the cucumber beetle genus? And because of that, the first one creates the second one? Does nature produce, apparently ex nihilo, from nothing, the one to serve the needs of the other practically right before our eyes as the need arises in each specific case? Maybe no cucumber beetles physically exist where there is no cucumber plant already. Maybe the need for the beetle is locked into the seed. And then when the seed germinates, some line of organic code executes. Now, just to help us along with that idea, let's just put out there, let's postulate that the Earth has its own astral plane and mental plane, and that everything made of the Earth's elements has its own share of that astral and mental plane. And the cucumber seed, of course, is one of those things made out of the Earth's elements, all right? So in this picture of affairs, the seed's organic code executes mentally, astrally, and physically together. And at that mental plane level, at which conceptual abstractions operate, and at which one of them can attract another one at the speed of thought, the demand for a cucumber beetle alerts the elementals that work the astral chemistry or the astral physics to pull out of the archives the astral form of the beetle, and into that form pours the stuff of physical matter that satisfies the demand, and voila, the beetle shows up at the right time in your garden. I could be wrong about all this. I could be wrong about all of it. Maybe you know more about it than I do. That is about the cucumber and its beetle. Maybe you're a green-thumbed gardener and you've seen evidence to the contrary. Maybe you're a green-handed horticulturist and you could enlighten me with relevant details to the contrary. Or maybe you're a green-minded botanist and have written a book to the contrary. Fine and dandy for you. I'm none of those. So let's just go ahead. Let's go on and just say, I'm wrong about it. Doesn't really matter. What I'm about to reveal at least appears to support my notion, and besides, I only mean to give you an example, the cucumber thing, and it was not a good one. So what? You're gonna soon be falling into step with me in my overall direction, I think, no matter what. Let me interject something here. I'm trying right now to get past some nervousness about setting all this forth. And so far it sounds pretty far-fetched. So far it sounds like going to China just to get from Poland to France. Or like trying to drive in a nail with a sledgehammer. Or sounds plain delusional. I don't want the men in white jackets coming over here right now to take me away in the back of a padded van, so please keep an open mind and keep your lips zipped until I'm done. And then once we're on the same wavelength here over it all, then maybe we can get together and confront the scientists en force. My houseplants know that I know about it because I told them I know about it, and they seem to be happier as a result. So please, by all means, suspend your judgment and try to assume that I know what I'm talking about from the start. All right, I feel a little safer about going on. So where are we? Okay. So far, I've laid out a lot of maybes. Let's get down to some brass tacks. First among them, there's that question about which came first, the chicken or the egg. Whoever introduced that question to the rest of humanity was either ignorant or immoral, because as he stated it, the question does not obtain, and its legacy has been one of endless literary controversy, dividing mankind into two opposing camps. And as though that division hasn't created enough trouble in and of itself, it started the trend, manifesting in one division after another down through time. The German philosopher Hegel, however, was the first person to pick up on the social phenomena explicitly, and then he went and made himself famous with it. He said that human history could intentionally be controlled by this thing. He said that the powers that be could use it to manipulate affairs such that they tiptoe society toward eventual totalitarianism. He didn't necessarily call it that. No, he proposed the end as the ideal state. Well, we all know that power corrupts, and that absolute power corrupts absolutely. And soon the powers that be took up with Hegel's formula and turned it against the masses corruptedly, and the further it went, the more they employed it toward absolute corruption to their own advantage. And they're still at it. And what is that formula? Create what he calls a thesis or a state of affairs that appears to be a social problem or an economic problem or a political problem or really is such a problem, and also create an opposing state of affairs which he calls an antithesis or an antithesis, and infect the masses with both the thesis and its antithesis, and then just sit back and watch while society divides itself over them. And then third, those very same powers that be allow to come forth what he calls a synthesis, or a solution that heals the dividing rift and at the same time looks like it will solve the social problem that they themselves initially got going with the content of the thesis in the first place. People go along with the solution. Human history moves forward, and the whole thing was planned out in the first place. And the synthesis gets used as a new thesis, and the whole thing goes around again and again, one step further along each time. Sneaky. So how's that for some brass tacks, huh? And it all came from that question. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? And like I said, that question does not even obtain, as it's stated. It doesn't actually point to anything that involves a sound answer. That's why the endless literary controversy. And in the minds, in the mind and words of an Indian mystic, one Sri Teshwar, endless literary controversies for sluggard minds. So let's all just get together here, all right? Get on the right track and dissolve the slugs in our minds with a dash of the salt of good reason. And while we're at it, let's just throw in another dash of that of morality. Are you with me? Good. And I have to say, I'm feeling even less nervous now. So let's just go at why the question does not obtain. Here's where the cucumber beetle example plays a role, even if it's a poor example biologically. It's the principle behind it that matters. More germanely, the astral and mental plane chemistry and physics goings on, to which I've already alluded, that matter. Wait. Gosh darn it, I had planned on waiting for what felt to me to be the right time to tell you something. I thought that right time would be a little later. But I gotta spill the beans right now, because part of my initial nervousness came from guilt. Here I've gone and brought up morality a couple of times already. I just have to come clean with this to get it off my chest, to clear my conscience. And in doing this, I'm playing the role of my own messenger, so don't shoot me. The thing is, I've done some pretty nasty stuff in association with all this that I'm laying out. Probably that's the whole reason why I'm even telling you any of it. See, I've taken things a bit too far. Way too far, really. I mean, with certain of my actual doings. And I need to alert you about certain dangers that I've created with them. Honestly, they're horrific. I've come to my senses, though, and I've decided that the safety of the many are more important than the secretive whims and doings of the individual, that latter specifically being yours truly. Now, that's all I can say about it right now until I conjure up some more nerve. So, right now, let's get back to the chicken or the egg thing. Some people say the proverbial chicken or egg question, or simply the proverbial chicken and egg. There's nothing proverbial about it. Where's the proverb in there? Show me the proverb in there. There isn't one. Proverbial? Perennial? Oh yeah, perennial nonsense, that's what it is. Look, you can't get blood from a turnip, right? Exactly. Well, you also can't get at which physically came first out of two poultry choices where physically the two need each other to be there already. And the question refers to the physical chicken and the physical egg. Do you maybe see where I'm going with this yet? Can you climb out on a limb and venture a guess? The only reasonable answer to the question, which came first, the chicken or the egg, is Comrade Clock knows better than to worry about that old mundane nonsense. So what the clock's the matter with you? In the face of reason, the question just pretty much self-dissolves. But as you might anticipate, there is a way out. Another option. That is, if we want a shot at the possibility of a sound answer to the chicken or egg thing, we have to frame the question differently. I don't know, maybe something like, How might we resolve the seeming impossibility for the first chicken and the first egg to have both shown up at the same time? Yeah. Or maybe to spell it out more, I don't know, eggs come from chickens and chickens come from eggs. Both are necessary for each other. At the same time, it makes sense that one or the other of the two had to come first and the other one follow. But then that gives us an unresolvable dilemma, and yet we de facto, or in fact, have physical chickens and physical eggs in the world. So to find an answer, whether or not it's an accurate one, we must ask what non-physical mode of explanation might actually be at work, and also will ring intuitively true for us. Then the question is, what might such an explanation look like? And then here we would invoke my earlier mention of the germinating cucumber seed and the execution of an organic code, not just physically, but also astrally and mentally, initiating action at those other two levels, which eventually causes the cucumber beetle to physically show up at the right time where the demand for it exists and originated. But I'm sorry. What about the divine intervention? Well, first of all, I don't quite grasp where the intervention in it would be. I mean, intervening in what? It almost sounds to me like interfering, and if it's divine, then where's the interference? That's besides the point. Nothing comes from nothing, just out of nowhere. So what might a description of this divine intervention actually look like? How might it work to produce the result that we see with our eyes? From out on that limb you climbed on a moment ago, do you think it might look something like what that non-physical explanation might look like that I just spoke of a moment ago, that harks back to my relevant suggestion with respect to the cucumber plant and its beetle? Do you? Do you think it might? I do. I'm pretty sure that by now you're with me on my thinking, but I just want to make sure we're both on the same page. Don't get me wrong. I'm not asserting that the details of my proposed explanation are correct. I'm just saying that now we have a shot in a direction that actually has a target. I'm also incidentally implying that the so-called divine intervention is another name for the correct explanation, regardless of whether the user of that name knows that. And I'll just go ahead and throw this out there right now, too. I don't think I'm too far off from accurately hitting some of the involved details either. In the least, the general gist of it rings intuitively true to me. And if you've been keeping an open mind like I asked you to, it probably does for you as well. Now listen to me here. Listen to me. I said I got myself involved in some horrific stuff, and I wanted to come clean about it here, because you need to know about some dangers that I've brought upon the human species. Well, I hadn't actually said all that outright, but I'm saying it to you now. I have done that to stuff, and it is consequential, and not in a good way. And now here's another point, at which I'm feeling some nervousness about spilling my guts like this. Maybe it's a good thing that we're not face to face in the flesh right now, because I can see where this might piss you off pretty good. That it wasn't all an accident on my part, or it wasn't all just unintentional on my part. Not that I meant it to create harm to others. Well, can you just try to relate with me on this for a minute here, somehow? I mean, we all have our dark side, right? A side that thinks that thinks about up and punching somebody right in the face over nothing, maybe during a casual conversation. Or that wrings our mental hands and laughs all sinister like and says, if I were one of the powers that be, I'd give every man all the same rights that I give to myself. Not. Okay. So yeah, the fact is that yes, I intended to bring some harm at certain points just because I could. All right, I spit it out now. You might have done the same things I've done under the same circumstances, so don't get too far up on your high horse here. We're all human. The problem is human for how much longer? I'm not sure I can say anymore. The history of the human race has largely been one of self-destruction, and I've just helped it along its way. But don't forget, I've come to my senses and decided to tell you about it, and you can't fault me there. I have my nagging conscience to worry about. I don't want it stirring up any mental and astral repercussions that materialize and bite me in my ass later on. I have to look out for number one. Everybody has to look out for number one, right? And I'm no different than anybody else. I needed to figure out the cucumber beetle mystery. It kept bugging me, just like something else has always bugged me. How is it that here and there through history we find, say, some person or small group of people over in one part of the world and a few handfuls of others in other parts of the world, and none of these parts have contact with the other parts, and yet these people all come up with some new ideology or some revolutionary methodology at right around the same time as one another. I've heard it called the 100th monkey phenomena, or the 100th monkey effect. Well, I guess giving it a name seems to satisfy some people about it, and they say, oh, so that's what it is, and then they stop asking questions. But I always wanted to know what makes the phenomenon tick. But that's a different thing. Similar but different. I'm talking about the cucumber beetle thing. But I had to go to non-physical. I had to switch over to non-physical in order to have a shot at a good answer. And I needed to get past mere armchair speculation. Some kind of non-physical action was due. And I already had the astral plane idea in my mind, the one I told you about. So I decided to get into the astral projection thing, regardless of the dangers I've heard that it can entail. But I studied up on it. I watched YouTube videos about it. And I went to some metaphysical bookstores, and I asked around. I ran into a guy whose father had been a Satanist, and the guy himself was a warlock, a magician, a druid priest, and a shaman all at the same time. And I asked him a lot of questions about the practice in which I was about to engage. We became friends. He gave me a rare grimoire, which I could feel vibrating when I held it, and he even made me a warrior choker out of rib bone beads and sinew and ermine tail, and he consecrated it to protect me. I went to some rare book archives and dug up the writings of Bremelin and Agrippa and a multitude of others, the names of whom I'm not even going to say, and I poured through them. None of this Necronomicon foolishness or anything like that, no. I'm talking the real stuff. That Necronomicon bug isn't even real. Oh yeah, it exists, but it's fake. This one Samuel Weiser I heard somewhere, he at one time being the largest East Coast importer of occult books, had got together with some other guy, I don't know, maybe Crowley, I'm not sure. But they made up the book themselves and then made it seem like some genuine old manuscript that had got dug up and made its way into trade house print because everybody had kept coming to Weiser's in New York City or somewhere and asking for the book, which of course didn't even really exist yet. but actually it was just a fictional book, the name and the alleged nature of the contents of which had been made up by literature professor H.P. Lovecraft in a couple of his horror stories that he confabulated. Yeah, so this way these guys could satisfy customers and make money, lots of money, never mind the adverse psychological effects it had by way of the power of suggestion on some young readers who wanted to take a stab at dabbling in the dark arts, just like they like to play with Ouija boards at parties when their parents aren't home and with their weird makeup on. The first thing here, the book is a hocus-pocus mind game, and the second one is a troublesome and misdirected cheap shot way for kids to think they're mystics or something. No good comes from either one or from anything like them. At last I put to practice the best of what I'd learned to practice. And while I got going with it, I bore in mind the findings of the divinely devout and famous botanist Luther Burbank, with which he demonstrated that plants responded to human emotion. A phenomenon rather clearly involving incorporeal goings-on. I actually felt at moments like I was about to break into areas of investigation and activity usually reserved for saints and monks and seers. At the time, I had no idea what might come of it. I just wanted to solve the mystery of the cucumber beetle so that I could put it behind me once and for all and then move on with my otherwise peaceful and humble life. I'm sure you can understand that. Like I indicated, I had told my plants about my initial notions about the secret lives of plants and bugs together, and they appeared and seemed happier as a result of me having told them. So I already had a little mental rapport going on with them. So now I went to them again, and I played around with Luther Burbank's propositions, and it wasn't long until I found myself harmonizing with plant mind through my house plants, which, by the way, are quite large snake plants, the ones with zebra-type stripes. Not that that matters much here, but I just like the way they look. But it got to the point where I could consciously experience life as it is to plants by astrally entering into my snake plant's personal spheres. And it was rather interesting doing that, too. I got to feel and even see the actions of my plant's xylums and phloems and their roots, and to participate in their joys of photosynthesis and their anticipations of water and so on, all from inside the plants themselves and from their perspectives. I learned what it's like to be a plant, rooted in the soil and reaching upward and feeling the air, basking in the light and absorbing the the astral vibrations in the room. And also in a more remote way, sensing the overall life of plants as a whole beyond the confines of the immediate physical space. And I appreciated them letting me in like that. And I believed that I had attained a form of knowledge that my human fellow men have rarely attained, let alone even considered beyond maybe once or twice during their lives, asking themselves for a moment, hey, I wonder how that tree feels standing over there like that with everything happening around it all the time. Do you see why I asked you to suspend your judgment and keep your lips zipped until I'm done here? And don't you agree by now, at least a little bit, that I had good reason to think I might be on the right track now? To maybe find the answer to my initial question? And for that matter, to that perennial chicken or egg nonsense, even if I didn't give a rat's rear end about it? So then I took my newly found rapport with plant mind outside my cucumbers. Naturally, I wanted to get into their portions of plant mind now, but I also wanted to get from theirs over into that of the cucumber beetle's insect mind, with my cucumber plants as the operating medium or interface. And then I might be able to astral project myself into whatever realm it is at which the events occur that makes the cucumber beetles show up in connection with their physical hosts, and at least see, by astral vision, how it works. And I managed to pull it all off, with the help of some of the things my shaman friend had told me. And yeah, I always wore the choker he'd made for me for protection. But now this is where things started to get dicey. I discovered that I could assert my humanoid mind to control some of the cucumber plant mind and the cucumber beetle insect mind with respect to their biological instantiations in my garden. At first, I could only increase or decrease the numbers of the bugs showing up seemingly overnight. Then I got to using insecticides to add in a new test condition, and to assist, I set up an isolated control group, and I kept detailed records, which I'm not going to get into right now because they're not the point. I just want you to know that I did keep a journal of everything I did and of everything I observed. I'd worked it too hard already, and had already been bugged too much by the involved mystery that set all this into motion for me in the first place to now just go about these affairs carelessly and without keeping tabs on my progress. So happens that it might have been better, though, if I hadn't kept close tabs on it, though, or if I had burned my records early on and did a memory wipe or something, or if I had just quit right then. But hindsight, is 20/20. I felt some conscience pangs over what I was getting into, manipulating these poor plants and bugs' lives like that. But I also fell prey to the feeling of power. And again, as we all know, power corrupts. And absolute power corrupts absolutely. Could happen to anybody, right? And if you think otherwise, then you are as dishonest about it as I am sure of it. And soon power overtook conscience, and I immersed myself in seeing what I could do. Then one thing led to another, and another. I need a little breather here. Maybe I think you might need a little breather here, because me, I already got past my nervousness about 15 minutes ago. Still, let's both just sit back here a minute and reflect on what's going on. Wait, hold on. Hang on a second. Somebody just now slid me a note here, reminding me of something. Let me see. Okay, we're okay. Let's just backtrack a little. Let's go back to divine intervention. Remember when I said, but I'm sorry, what about the divine intervention as a proposed alternative to my own germinating seed, mental execution of an organic code, and then chain of events that follow it? Well, there's still another mode of explanation that is worthy of mention. How about if, yes, the beetles only live on the cucumber plants, yeah, and of course that's why we don't see them anywhere else, but they don't manifest there like I have said, but instead they fly there. Seems simple enough. Why in the world didn't I just say that in the first place? Why didn't I think of it a long time ago? But it's not really all that simple. These are little bugs, not eagles. And they can't have much of a lifespan. And they're really light in weight. The breeze could blow them off track if they fly even a short distance. I've never even seen one flying, but that doesn't prove anything other than they probably don't get frequent flyer miles. Still, the thing is, if I have a cucumber plant in my garden, and the next cucumber plant is 10 miles away, and my plant has beetles on it, but the other one 10 miles away is still just a little bit more than a sprout and it doesn't have any beetles on it, how do some of my beetles get over there on that other plant? And the proposed answer to that is there must be a mental connection over large distances among cucumber beetles and also among the plants and the beetles over long distances, at least for the first beetle to get the message. And then once it's over there, it gets the message back to the other plant, and it's, and it sends along the confirmed flight route, and, the back to the my plant, and then my beetles sort out which ones are going to go over to the other plant. Something like that. And don't forget how small these little guys are. And their light flight weight and their potentially short lifespan. See, for all this to work right, there must be an uncannily powerful and accurate mental connection all the way around, it would seem, and an acute awareness of what it means, and a brow-raising feat of travel for even just one bug to pull it off. But a person could argue that while the flying part is accurate, the mechanism at work is not mental, but it's physical, okay? Maybe it's a sense of smell over that distance, or a sound, or some frequency that uses the Earth's prevailing signature frequency, the existence of which can be extrapolated scientifically as a natural phenomenon, open to indirect but still empirical observation, uses it as a sort of carrier wave that gets across the message, directing a few bugs to go way over to this new cucumber plant, 10 miles away, and then just around the bend and under the third lemon tree and right down there between the last two marigolds, or something like that. Okay, sure. Maybe so. Well, let's say that somebody even provides detailed data, the information from which we could argue the same thing, and from which we can even determine what it would take for us to know if the conclusion is false. If it is false de facto, then what? What then? Well, here's what. It doesn't rule out our explanation. Both could be in the mix together. But now you ask, why have our explanation at all then, if this other one with the evidence to support itself satisfies the need for an explanation on its own? And here's why. Because my evidence supports mine too. Besides, things rarely ever boil down to one level of explanation only, and thinking that they do is usually a matter of reducing affairs too far, and we commit the error of oversimplification. And this is right here's the problem with metaphysical materialism. Science can see remarkably well, but its viewfinder has markedly inhibiting limitations. Okay, so now this is where we are here. I was playing God with plants and bugs at the intersection of science and my own self-manufactured black magic to produce biological results without giving a rat's rear end about doing it. That's why things were getting dicey. And then I fell prey to something else, too, invoking into the mix Hegel's formula to control history. At first, just among the plants and the bugs, but then it evolved into with the plants and the bugs. Did you hear what I just now said? Listen while I repeat it. I said, with them. Are you getting my drift? Now let me ask you this. Mightn't you have done the same? Honest bright now. Mightn't you have done the same as I'm saying I did? Honest bright now. Honest bright. I turned my creations, and some of them are despicable, outrageous. I turned them loose on the humanoid, mental, astral, and physical planes on this planet. After infecting plant mind and insectoid mind directly, and therefore humanoid mind indirectly, with my own agenda, carried out by a causal chain of theses, antitheses, and syntheses, fashioned according to my own idea of history, the self-destruction of the human species. Or really the self-destruction of the human species under the sneaky control of insects, some of which you can find right out there on your pretty garden vegetables and herbs and fruits and flowers, looking all nice and innocent on them, and others too horrid to be seen by human eyes, and so they live inside the earth. We wouldn't want to make ourselves obvious, would we? But really now, like I said, it's my own idea of history. Yeah, the self-destruction of the human species under the sneaky control of these insects, yes. But also, I created the entire scheme and gave it life with a will of its own that I put in it from mine, and I meant to do it. It's the least I could do to help this pitiful species of ours along its way in the direction it created for itself a long, long, long time ago. Our species is so pitiful it has to wipe its ass after it shits. It can barely go outside without wearing clothes. It has to domesticate animals just to get them to like it. It has to use hand-fashioned weapons to hunt for its meat while pretending it's at the top of the food chain. It's so arrogant that it thinks it belongs on this planet, but it's just a misfit, monstrous pile of garbage DNA that's too stupid to realize its own ignorance and is unfit to even pretend it owns property. A mistake far worse than the platypus, and it is going down. But not me. I'm not going down with it. Oh, no, not yours truly. I'm in ultimate control of it all. I have my ways. Oh, yes, I have my ways. The only thing I can't do is to stop the process that's underway. Its momentum has a life of its own. I can't call all of my minion ferals to come back, let alone revert them back into the mental and astral fabrics from which I put them together. I can't stop the psychic virus with which I infected the human race. I can't, and neither can anyone else. I planned it that way. Oh, you bet I did. And I have the journals to prove it. Everything I did, and everything I observed, every last bit of it. And that record is carved into the Earth's memory, and into the galaxy's memory, and into that of the whole of creation. It'll be there when the sun rises and falls for its last time. It'll be there when darkness finally overcomes the Milky Way. It'll be there when chaos defeats cosmos. And it'll still be there when the final curtain falls on all of manifestation. And so will I. And look out for number one, I made sure of it. And this race never even deserved a chance, but it had one, and it blew it. I'm sorry. But me, no, I'm not going down. Now I've done the last thing I needed to do in connection with you miserable sacks of protoplasm. I've told you. And my conscience is clear. can't fault me for that. I've got nothing else to say. Thanks for listening to I'm Sorry, Friends. I hope you enjoyed the story and felt the horror of humanity from which it arose. I would really appreciate it if you give the story a big thumb up below the video, and I welcome your comments further down. I just ask that when you write your comments, you keep an open mind and respect others. If you like this channel, feel free to support it by subscribing to it. Please always check back for weekly uploads.